Episode 3. Turbulence. Katherine Morrison sat frozen in seat 27B, the weight of 2 hours of observation pressing down on her like the stale cabin air. Around her, the flight had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Passengers wedged into their seats like sardines, flight attendants navigating the impossibly narrow aisles with practiced efficiency born of necessity rather than comfort. She pulled out her phone, switching it to airplane mode as instructed, and opened her notes app. Her fingers hovered over the screen. What could she possibly write that would adequately capture what she was witnessing? Boarding chaos. 43 minutes for a domestic flight. Gate agent looked close to tears. Overhead bins. Passengers literally fighting for space. No system. Pure survival. Flight attendant James Rivera, 12 years with company. Union rep. Filed complaints about working conditions that HR dismissed. Looks exhausted before flight even begins. The words felt hollow, inadequate. She was trying to quantify human suffering in bullet points. A sudden jolt of turbulence rattled the cabin. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and Katherine watched James Rivera straighten from where he'd been helping an elderly passenger in first class. His expression shifted instantly from warmth to professional neutrality as he moved toward the back of the plane. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. His voice came through the intercom, smooth despite the fatigue she'd seen in his eyes. Please return to your seats and ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened. Another jolt, harder this time. A woman 2 rows ahead gasped. Katherine gripped her armrests, her knuckles whitening. She'd flown hundreds of thousands of miles, but always in first class, always with extra space and premium everything. Down here in economy, the turbulence felt different, more claustrophobic, more threatening. It's fine, the man in the aisle seat said, not looking up from his laptop. Just some chop. But it wasn't fine. Katherine could see it in the faces around her. The white knuckles, the held breaths, the parents reaching for their children's hands. And she could see something else. The complete absence of flight attendants offering reassurance. Because there weren't enough of them. Because Richard Pemberton had cut staffing to the bone. The turbulence intensified. The plane dropped suddenly, and several passengers cried out. Katherine's stomach lurched. Her laptop bag slid forward under the seat in front of her, and she heard the unmistakable sound of liquid spilling. "Oh God, oh God," a young woman across the aisle muttered, her hands pressed against her mouth. Katherine turned to see James Rivera making his way down the aisle, one hand on each row of seats to steady himself. His face was calm, almost serene, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "We're okay, folks," he said, his voice carrying over the aircraft noise. "Just some rough air. Captain's navigating through it. Everyone please stay seated with your belts fastened." He reached the young woman, who was now openly crying. "Ma'am, I need you to breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. You're doing great." Katherine watched him work. This man whose complaints her HR department had dismissed. He was doing the job of 3 people, calming passengers, checking seatbelts, all while the plane bucked and swayed, and he made it look easy. The turbulence finally subsided after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes. The seatbelt sign remained on, but the cabin relaxed slightly. James Rivera continued his sweep through economy, checking on passengers, offering water to those who needed it. When he reached Katherine's row, their eyes met again. "You okay, Ms. Miller?" he asked. The fake name still jarred her. "I'm fine. That was intense. Welcome to modern air travel." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You should try it when we're short-staffed and running 3 flights back-to-back with no break." "That happens often?" James glanced toward the front of the cabin, then back at her. Something in her tone must have signaled genuine interest rather than idle curiosity. "More than it should," he said quietly. "We used to have minimum crew rest requirements that actually meant something. Now?" He shrugged. "The company found every loophole in the regulations. We're legal, technically, but legal and safe aren't always the same thing." Before Katherine could respond, a call button chimed from first class, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. "Duty calls," James said, but he didn't move immediately. "Can I ask you something, Ms. Miller?" "Of course. Why are you taking notes? I saw you earlier, writing on your phone." Katherine's heart hammered. She forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. I'm a teacher, elementary school. I'm flying to a conference in Chicago about classroom management and student well-being. The cover story David Morrison had crafted rolled off her tongue. I was just thinking about how some of the dynamics here, the stress, the systems that don't work, the way people respond under pressure, they're not that different from what I see in education. It wasn't entirely a lie. The parallels were real, even if her motivations weren't what she was claiming. James studied her for a moment, and Katherine held her breath. Then he nodded slowly. That's actually pretty insightful. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. We're both in service industries that used to be about people and became about metrics. The call buttons chimed again, more insistent. I really do have to go, James said, but if you want to talk more about systems and stress and all that, I'm around. Lord knows I've got opinions. He smiled, genuinely this time. Occupational hazard of being a union rep. Katherine watched him navigate toward first class, his movements graceful despite the confined space. She opened her notes again. James Rivera sees the parallels, understands that this is systemic, not individual. He's trying to fix it from the inside, but HR won't listen. How many others like him have we silenced? The flight leveled out, and the seatbelt sign finally turned off. The cabin erupted in activity. Passengers heading to lavatories, retrieving items from overhead bins, stretching in the aisles. Katherine stayed in her seat, observing. In the row ahead, a mother was trying to calm a crying toddler while simultaneously managing a diaper bag, a tablet, and a bottle. No one offered to help. The passengers on either side of her actively leaned away, creating as much distance as possible. Across the aisle, an elderly man was struggling to retrieve his medication from the overhead bin. He was too short to reach comfortably, and each attempt left him more frustrated and embarrassed. Katherine stood to help, but the man in the aisle seat, the one who'd been working on his laptop, got there first. Here, let me, he said, pulling down a small carry-on. Thank you, young man, the elderly passenger said. I don't know why they make these things so high. Profit margins, laptop man said, surprising Katherine. More bins means more bags, means fewer checked bags, means more fee revenue. Plus, they can cram in more seats if the ceiling's higher. He glanced at Katherine. I'm in airline consulting. Trust me, every inch of this tube is calculated for maximum extraction. Katherine felt her face grow hot. He was describing exactly the kind of analysis Richard Pemberton presented to the board quarterly. Maximum revenue per available seat mile, optimal load factors. Ancillary revenue growth. She'd approved those strategies, signed off on them, celebrated them in earnings calls. That seems ruthless, she said carefully. It's business. Laptop man settled back into his seat. Airlines operate on razor-thin margins. If they don't optimize every revenue stream, they go bankrupt. Then nobody has jobs. But at what cost? The words escaped before Katherine could stop them. Look around. People are miserable. The staff is exhausted. This isn't sustainable. Laptop man shrugged. Customers say they want better service, but they book based on price. Every time. The airlines that tried to compete on quality, most of them are gone. The market spoke. The market. How many times had Katherine used that exact phrase in board meetings? The market demands efficiency. The market requires discipline. The market won't reward sentiment. But the market was made of people. People like the exhausted mother with the crying toddler. People like the elderly man who couldn't reach his medication. People like James Rivera running himself ragged because there weren't enough crew members. A commotion from the front of the cabin interrupted her thoughts. Raised voices, sharp and angry. I don't care what your policy is. I paid for this seat and I expect service. Katherine craned her neck to see. A passenger in first class, a white man in an expensive suit, was standing in the aisle, jabbing his finger at a flight attendant. Not James, but a young woman who looked barely out of training. Sir, I apologize, but we've run out of the beef option I can offer you. I don't want the alternative. I want what I ordered. I understand your frustration, sir, but do you know who I am? I'm Platinum Elite. I fly 200,000 miles a year on this airline. The entire cabin had gone quiet, watching. Katherine saw the young flight attendant's face flush, saw her hands trembling slightly. She was maybe 23, 24, probably in her first year. James appeared from the galley, moving to stand beside his colleague. "Sir, I'm the senior flight attendant on this flight. Perhaps I can help?" Finally, someone with authority. The man turned his ire on James. "Your airline has gone completely downhill. The service is terrible. The food is inedible, and apparently you can't even keep track of meal counts." "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience," James said, his voice level. "We did have your meal selection loaded, but we had a last-minute aircraft swap due to maintenance, and the catering didn't transfer completely. I take full responsibility." A lie, Katherine realized. A graceful lie to protect his colleague and deflect the passenger's anger. She made a note. James covering for systemic failures, taking personal blame for corporate decisions. "I don't want your apologies," the man said. "I want compensation. I want miles. I want an upgrade on my next flight." "I can certainly file a service recovery request on your behalf," James said. "May I have your Sky Rewards number?" Katherine knew exactly what would happen to that service recovery request. It would go into a queue, get reviewed by an algorithm that would determine the minimum necessary compensation to retain the customer, and generate an automated response. The flight attendant's report would be flagged as a service failure. James's record would take a hit, all because of decisions made in a boardroom 1,000 miles away. The confrontation eventually subsided, but the tension lingered. Katherine watched James return to the galley, watched him exchange a few words with the young flight attendant, watched him squeeze her shoulder reassuringly before returning to his duties. She thought about the discrimination complaints. 23 in the last quarter alone. How many of those involved passengers like the man in first class? How many involved employees like the young flight attendant? Thrown into impossible situations with inadequate support? The flight attendant call button above Katherine's head chimed. She looked up, confused. She hadn't pressed it. The woman in the window seat was staring straight ahead, her hand still on the button. "Excuse me," she said when James arrived. "I need to use the restroom, and this woman won't let me out." She gestured at Katherine with undisguised irritation. Katherine immediately stood, pressing herself into the aisle to let the woman pass. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. You were sitting right there. You should have known I'd need to get out eventually." The woman pushed past, her designer handbag knocking into Katherine's shoulder. James caught Katherine's eye, and she saw something there. A flash of recognition, of shared understanding. He'd seen this play out 1,000 times. The casual rudeness, the assumption that service industry workers existed solely to absorb complaints and criticism. "Some people," he said quietly once the woman was out of earshot, "forget that we're all just trying to get through the day." Katherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She was one of those people. Or she had been, before she'd stripped away the executive armor and stepped into this world. She returned to her seat and pulled out her phone again. Her notes app was filling up, but the words still felt inadequate. How could she capture the casual cruelty she was witnessing? The grinding exhaustion? The systemic failures dressed up as individual shortcomings? The plane began its descent into Chicago. Katherine looked out the window at the city sprawling below. Another hub, another airport, another day of this same grinding reality playing out across hundreds of flights. She thought about Marcus Westfield and Richard Pemberton, probably in a meeting right now, discussing the next round of cost cuts. 8% reduction in staffing costs. Another 1,700 jobs, maybe more. How many James Riveras would that eliminate? How many young flight attendants would be thrown into impossible situations with even less support? How many passengers would suffer through even worse service? The wheels touched down with a jarring thump. Katherine gripped her armrests as the plane decelerated, engines roaring in reverse thrust. Around her, passengers immediately unbuckled and stood, reaching for overhead bins despite the plane still taxiing at high speed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've reached the gate and the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign." James's voice came through the intercom, tired but still professional. No one listened. They never did. Katherine stayed in her seat, watching the chaos unfold. The shoving, the jockeying for position, the complete disregard for the crew's instructions. This was the world she'd created. Not intentionally, but through 1,000 small decisions that prioritized efficiency over humanity. The plane finally reached the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off, and the cabin erupted in motion. Katherine waited, letting the crush of passengers flow past her. She had no connecting flight to catch, no urgent meeting. She was Karen Miller, elementary school teacher, and Karen Miller had all the time in the world. When the aisle finally cleared, she stood and retrieved her bag. James was at the forward door, thanking passengers as they deplaned. She could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "Thank you for flying with us," he said automatically as she approached. Then he focused on her face and his expression shifted slightly. "Miss Miller, I hope the flight wasn't too rough for your first time flying skyward." "It was educational," Katherine said carefully. James laughed, a short, bitter sound. "That's one word for it." He glanced behind him, checking that they were alone. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice for your conference? Please, whatever systems you're building in your classroom, whatever policies you're implementing, make sure they work for the people on the ground, not just the people in charge. Because the people in charge," he shook his head, "they never see what really happens. They just see the numbers." Katherine felt the words like a physical blow. "You don't think they care?" "I think they care about what they can measure. Customer satisfaction scores, on-time performance, revenue per seat. But they don't see the gate agent crying in the break room. They don't see the flight attendant working 3 legs back to back with no food break. They don't see the passengers treated like cattle." He met her eyes directly. "They don't see us as human beings, just line items on a spreadsheet." "What if?" Katherine stopped, choosing her words carefully. "What if someone at the top did see? What if they understood? Would it make a difference?" James was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I don't know anymore. I used to think so. That's why I became a union rep, why I filed all those complaints. But every time I hit a wall, HR dismisses them, management ignores them. The board doesn't care as long as the stock price goes up." He straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. "But I keep trying anyway, because what else can you do?" Katherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She moved toward the jet bridge, but James's voice stopped her. "Miss Miller, whatever you're really doing, and I don't think you're just a teacher going to a conference, I hope it makes a difference. I really do." Katherine turned back, her heart pounding. "What makes you think? 12 years in this job, you learn to read people." James smiled sadly. "You see more than most passengers do. You ask different questions, and you look at us like we're people, not furniture." He shrugged. "Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you really are just a very observant teacher. But if you're not," he paused, "if you're not, then please tell whoever needs to hear it. This isn't sustainable. Something has to change." Katherine held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and walked away, her mind racing. James Rivera had seen through her cover, or at least suspected something. How long before others did the same? How long could she maintain this charade? But more importantly, how could she have been so blind? She emerged into the terminal, immediately swallowed by the crowd. Chicago O'Hare at rush hour was chaos. Thousands of travelers rushing in every direction, monitors displaying delays and cancellations, the constant drone of announcements and crying children and rolling luggage. Katherine found a quiet corner near a closed gate and pulled out her phone. She had a text from Sarah Chen. "Board meeting moved up to tomorrow. Pemberton pushing hard for the staffing cuts. Westfield backing him. Need you back by tonight if possible." Her finger hovered over the reply button. She could end this now. Fly back to New York, return to her corner office, face the board meeting as Katherine Morrison, CEO, with all her authority and privilege intact. But then what? She'd seen 2 hours of operations from the passenger perspective. 2 hours out of a 2-week plan. What would she miss if she cut this short? What other truths remained hidden? She thought about James Rivera's exhausted eyes, the young flight attendant's trembling hands, the gate agent close to tears, the elderly man who couldn't reach his medication, the mother struggling alone with her toddler. She thought about the 1,700 jobs Richard Pemberton wanted to cut. Katherine opened her notes app and typed, "I'm staying. Karen Miller has more to learn." Then she switched to her messages and replied to Sarah, "Medical emergency. Can't make tomorrow's meeting. You'll have to handle Pemberton and Westfield without me. It was a lie, but it bought her time. Time to see more. Time to understand. Time to figure out how to fix what she'd broken. Katherine looked up at the departure board. Her cover story had her staying in Chicago for 3 days, attending a fictional education conference. She had hotel reservations, a rental car, a complete backstory. But she also had another skyward flight booked for tomorrow morning. Chicago to Atlanta, one of their busiest routes. Economy class, middle seat, 6 a.m. departure. She shouldered her bag and headed toward the exit, already dreading what she might discover next.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.